Hey everybody, two Alpha Gals here. I'm Debbie Nichols.
And I'm Candace Mathis, and you're listening to In the Tall Grass, where we're sharing stories of reinvention, resilience, and rediscovering joy.
Whether it's facing Alpha Gal syndrome or any other redefining chapter of life, we all have to learn how to navigate the journey through the tall grass. So here we go.
We are here today with Liza Blas, mom, healing empowerment coach, and podcast host of Very Happy Stories. Hi, Liza. We're so happy to have you here today.
Hi, gals. I am so excited to talk to you today.
Well, I know that you have so much to share with our listeners, so we'll just dive right in and get started. But let's begin by, if you don't mind, telling us a little bit about yourself and why you decided to start Very Happy Stories.
Yes, thank you so much. So I am a mom. I have two kids who are now teenagers, 17 and 14, and I really am part of a whole Lyme family. My kids have dealt with Lyme and various tick-borne illnesses, psychiatric issues, that whole thing. I have Lyme myself. My husband does too. And the journey has just been so hard and trying, right? There's been a lot of grief. But as my kids started to turn the corner, I was really searching for something to channel my creative juices, right? And I was also lacking passion in my own life. I was really I was kind of soul searching. I was kind of lost. I was a commercial real estate broker for 10 years. So that's kind of the hat I wore, that and being a mom. But I just felt the yearning for something more. And it was during the pandemic where, we were stuck at home and I was cleaning out a closet and I found an old journal of mine. And I started sifting through this journal and I realized that even in my darkest days, there was so much gratitude. I would always finish a journal entry with I'm just so grateful that we found a therapist that my child is responding to, or I'm just so grateful that we're trying a new medication. There was always something, right? And I just took a step back and I was like, these were some really hard days. These are some sad stories, but in here, when you look at the whole collective of this journal, there are some happy stories in here. There are some really happy stories in here. And I just really felt compelled to share my story of the reality of what these illnesses are doing to families. You just feel so lost and so hopeless. And I still powered through, just like so many moms are doing today, just as you gals have done too. You just keep persevering. But I wanted to share the truth. But, there's that happiness champion part of me that's there's still good here. So I intentionally named my podcast Very Happy Stories to shed light on these real topics, to validate what is happening in our families, but also to leave the listener inspired and motivated to do something, do something for themselves that's still going to spark joy and empowerment and all that's good stuff. It's all kind of bundled in there. So that really was the start of the podcast, Very Happy Stories. And I just have to add one little thing that I'm missing. It was during a therapy session where I was concerned that my daughter didn't have the desire to be happy. And her therapist asked her, well, what would make you happy? And my daughter said, well, I would be happy if my mom was happy. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not happy because this life has made me miserable. And then we just kind of were feeding into each other. So that's where I had to seek, where is my happiness? Where does my happiness lie? And that is when, backtrack there, rewind. I was searching for something to make me happy, to fill myself with the passion and joy. And that was the birth of Very Happy Stories podcast.
So Liza, I have a question. So how old were your kids when all of the health challenges kind of started?
That's such a great question. it should be so black and white, but truthfully, it goes back to the beginning. It really does. Because I passed on a congenital load to my daughter. So right off the bat, she was colic, nervous system was not regulated, a baby that just felt everything at such an intensity. So that was kind of the start. And then even as she was growing through those foundational years, she would have panic attacks. She, had gut issues, digestive issues. Now we know now that she had leaky gut. So it's hard to say where it all started, but I think the collapse really started showing signs when she enters school. Not just the public school system, but the school system in general lends itself to certain expectations, and she just didn't feel safe. It was a bit high anxiety, test taking or learning multiplication facts. Everything stressed her out. And that just is where things started buckling.
Yeah.
I also have another question for you. I was wondering, when you're talking about going back through your journal and you say that you found all these points of gratitude, which is so beautiful, by the way, do you think that was intentional or maybe subliminal? Or how do you think that sort of landed in your journal?
It's always intentional to me because I have to end on a positive note. I'm just a cheerleader like that. I really am. It's just an innate part of my personality where I just can't live with 100% misery. I need that 10% or that 25% to sustain me. And I had to show up to my kids, and I faked it a lot. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was faking the funk, and obviously my daughter could tell because she was like, I'd be happy if my mom was happy. And I was like,
Right.
what do you mean? I am the happiest person. And I was like, I'm not happy. And the therapist was like, no, she doesn't think so. And I said, so if I'm happy, then she'll be happy. And he said, it looks like it. And I have to tell you, Debbie, there is a huge energetic shift when the mother really does click into authentic happiness. I saw it with my own children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's funny that you bring that up a little bit, because talking about faking it to make it, right? We've talked about this, I think, like the last 2 or 3 podcast recordings, it's come up because, there's a part of us that wants to fight through things, right? To show our kids that we are trying to be happy, that we are in a good place, trying to be a good example for them. But there's also the element of showing them that we experience emotion and we learn how to deal with it. And that gives them tools, I think, to learn how to deal with it. And that's a really tricky balance, right? Because we're trying to be strong for them. We're also trying to give them these tools, which, allows us to sort of exhibit the breadth of our emotions. Do you feel like after that session with the therapist that you found some balance there? Was it tied to sort of directing your creative talents into this podcast, into the stories?
Yeah, it's all of that. It's all of that. And also, I learned I had to heal myself. Like, being happy is really about healing yourself. And happy people cry. And happy people grieve, and happy people have to hold themselves accountable to healing their trauma. So it's like a mismatched name, you know what I mean? But it's really about healing yourself. And so all of that you said, like, I had to learn how to feel. I had to learn how to be solid, authentically solid, so that I could hold space for my children when they were in crisis. I never learned how to sit in discomfort. And that's what I was modeling for my children. And really happy people that can sustain, a space of being content and satisfied and fulfilled, they do have that ability to feel it and heal it and sit in episodes of discomfort. So yeah, it's all of that, everything that you mentioned.
Yeah. And I think it's really hard. It's a really hard thing to do, right? Especially like, as you're talking, Liza, it brings me back to when I was really acute, and it's like, you can't see beyond a certain point when you're in it, when you're like in the suffering. But when you lean in and you go through it, right, you can't go around it. You have to go through it. You do ultimately, once you have kind of been forced in a way to take like this deeper look at least I was, of like, what is important, slowing down, really focusing on past trauma and all of these things. They just like were coming up, and it helped me step into the gratitude of joy. Like it's a very deep process, right? And I know it's really hard for people. A lot of people don't like feeling that discomfort, and you try to like run away from it or go around it instead of leaning into it. And do you have any advice for people that really fight that, or like feel like that is an impossible task to achieve, like to go from the grief to the gratitude?
Yes, it is so, so hard. And I think the first step truly is just setting the intention. Like having the awareness that like, gosh, I would like to be able to sit in discomfort, or I would like to be able to address this part of my childhood. Just setting that intention is miraculous, because it's like everything starts to snowball. And I am a really big believer in faith and getting through those really hard times. I have just had to like scream out to God, like, I need help to do this. And so I didn't feel like I was doing those things alone. And I did, pray and journal those feelings. It's like, I think that's where the journaling helped me, is I got those feelings out, and it's just a way to like channel it out. And it takes a lot of practice, and it's messy. And I think you have to surrender and accept the process, that it's painful and messy, and it's never one and done. And I do this type of work with people that I mentor. And I have done group programs in the past. And we kind of work through it together in like a very private, safe group of just sharing what we're going through. And sometimes you need the community to do that too. So yeah, and there's no set way to do it. But my biggest tip is just even setting the intention. You'd be amazed how God will just like kind of take over because you put it out there.
I love that too, because it takes people all different ways to get there, right? All different amounts of time, all different strategies. But if you set that intention with the intention of getting there in the way that you need to get there, I think that is empowering in a way, right? Like, okay, this is my goal. I'm going to get there. I'm going to let the universe or God or the Almighty or whatever it is that supports you, I'm going to let them do the work and supporting me in however I'm going to get there, right? Because I think, even between Candace and I, and we've very much gone through this journey together, not the initial part, but these last few years since our diagnosis and the whole starting 2 alpha-gals and everything. But we experience things really differently, right? Candace is so good at stepping back into that and sitting with that discomfort, right? And I'm like, well, I really want to, and maybe I'll do it tomorrow, but I'm not sure. And so, but she's setting that example for me. Like, I want to sit with the discomfort. It's just taking me a little bit longer to get there. And thank God for people like Candace who are patient with me as a business partner.
Look, you are I am not super patient. Like that was like one of the hardest things I've ever had to like surrender to, right? Like it is not an easy thing to do. I fought it for a long time, so if I can do it, anyone can do it. So
True.
Yeah, I love that. Set the intention. Yeah, that's
Set
great.
the intention. And then, there's so many tools. You have to find your toolkit. Okay. My toolkit was, I did yoga. I did meditation. I even tried tapping. I did EMDR with a therapist. people use breathing, some people run, some people paint, some people journal. Like, find your thing, and you will find, if you set the intention, I need a tool. I need a toolkit. And then, you'll be on social media, or you'll start following people, and you will start assembling the tools that work for you.
That's good advice too. And it's funny because that really resonated with me, because Candace and I often talk about this journey, this 2 Alpha Gals journey, the whole Alpha Gal journey, and how it feels divine, right? It took us both a long time of, I hate to say suffering, but that's what we were doing before we had a diagnosis. We were living with pain. We were living with unhappiness and misery, and nobody was validating us. Well, aside from maybe our husbands here and there, but the journey is really hard. But these last few years, we can see the divinity in that,
Yes.
right? And how we've been brought together with the purpose, and how every little thing, whether it's a bachelor's degree or work experience or an incident with our children, has fed into where we are now and is helping us do this, which is so beautiful, because that sort of, look, I've got chills just talking about it. That sort of lets you step back and go, oh, okay, the universe really does have my back. Like,
Yes.
So that is really cool. And I'm sure that you're influencing people so much with your empowerment coaching. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more about that and how that
Yes.
works and what you do?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So one of the things that used to frustrate me is when I would work with a psychiatrist, or I would work with a therapist, and they would kind of give me advice or walk me through the process of trying to heal, but they had no idea what I was dealing with. They had no idea what it's like to have your children have psychiatric issues. They had no idea the financial burden, and people could not relate to, well, how does the medical industry not understand what's happening? Like, it's just so mind-blowing. And so I really wanted people to understand that, I have lived this times 2 kids, totally done that. And if I can do it and be happy and live happy, you can too. I am just a normal person. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a teacher. I'm an everyday mom. And this is very doable and achievable. And so that's really my positioning. So I do coach and mentor other moms who are going through the struggle. And it's really you're in a place of crisis, and somebody on the team has to rally up, to change this dynamic. This is a really difficult, complex onion of a dynamic that is happening. And that's where I help people. And I have created actual modules that I run. So it's very structured, but it is completely based on my experience and also the one-on-one coaching that I had been doing. So people were just coming to me. Once I started sharing my story of what happened to my kids, there would be moms in my town that were really dealing with more neurodiversity issues of behavioral, but thinking it's behavioral because it's ADHD when it's much more than that. You know what I mean? So that's kind of just what happened. And then I just kind of structured things out because I've started realizing I'm repeating the same thing, right? I'm teaching the same mindset shift. And so I just kind of tailored it to the ones that were most successful in changing my life and the people that I was working with one-on-one.
Well, and I want to say, Liza, when you were talking initially right there, where you were saying, well, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm just a mom. But I think it reiterates how much we really innately know, right? It's validating how important it is to be your own advocate, either for yourself or your child, because your wisdom really does mean something.
100%. And someone told me years ago, she was like, Liza, a doctor's not going to heal you. You know, a therapist isn't going to heal you. Like you ultimately, by what your choices, like you will heal yourself. Right. And we just have to transfer that onto our children because they're children. So it is the way to heal the children is through the mother. I've always believed in that. They're children, right? So you do have to use your intuition and your gut and kind of get it together in order to get through the journey.
Yes, yes. It makes me think back to why we named our podcast In the Tall Grass, right? You know, there's the tick piece of it, of course, but the fact is that so often we still feel like we're in the tall grass, we're kind of stuck, kind of working our way out. But the idea is that you get there and then you see things in the tall grass like dandelions and things that are life and strong and rewarding in ways that maybe you didn't even know or expect. And that journey becomes part of you. And I think about how it is our responsibility, and I'm going to say it as moms in particular, to do this for our kids, to fight through these things, to be this example, to heal ourselves so that we can heal them, right? Put your oxygen mask on first, which keeps coming up recently too. I guess it's that divine.
It's a theme that will never get old.
No,
it will never get old because it's just the truth. And yeah, I think what we're speaking to, and it's really hard. I think this is one of the reasons why I even make this like number one when I do work with people. It's really about accountability. And that is very triggering for a lot of people because somewhere in our own childhood or programming, we start to see accountability as blame, you know, and we start tapping into feelings of guilt. And that's not really what accountability is. It's not like this is your fault, but accountability is about examining your participation in what's happening. Because because everybody is participating in whatever dynamic is established in your home, everyone's participating. And even if you are participating 30% to this really difficult dynamic, well, that's 30% that could be changed or altered. You know, even if whatever your participation is in my household, I think I was definitely participating even at like, I don't know, 60%, something of the majority. But when you hold yourself accountable to your participation, it really becomes your power button because there's so much that you can influence in changing the dynamic. So, yes, with the oxygen mask and healing yourself first. And I really feel like that steps into be accountable for your participation and where can you start creating change? And it is all about really focusing in on yourself.
Yeah, I love that.
I do too. And it can be a really, again, it can be a really hard place to step into to like take that first step. Like I remember so vividly when I was in a really bad like anaphylactic flare 2 summers ago. And I was to a place where I was on the couch every day, which was not like me. And, I had been doing really well. And then I was like hit again with this wave. And I'll never forget my 17-year-old came downstairs and he was like, "Oh, you're on the couch again." Like he just kind of was like, said this in a very deflated way. And I was trying all of these different medications and I don't know, that like was a smack for me where I was like, hold on.
Right.
Hold on. Like I am all about self-advocacy and, and taking responsibility, but it was like, I was letting this struggle steamroll me. And I knew I couldn't rely fully on someone else healing me or a medication being like this miracle pill because it wasn't the case. And it was in that moment that I was like, I'm done. Like, I'm going to do, even if it's like a micro step each day, like I made the decision I am not laying on this couch all day again. Like, I don't know. And I think our children are also can be some of our biggest teachers in that way, right?
Yes. What I love about what you just said is it's the intention. You set the intention that like, I can't do this anymore. And like, it's all about intentions that just get the ball rolling.
That's right.
And I do believe that our kids teach us so much. I have to say, before the journey, I always had anxiety, not really depression, but anxiety. It I think it was even debilitating. I can't even believe I was never medicated. I was self-medicating, with food and alcohol and, other things. This journey of like my children suffering and having to go through all of this, I don't know if I would be this happy, empowered person today without all of these lessons. Like they healed me. Like as I was so determined to do everything to heal my children, I learned to like, oh my God, I have to focus on myself. I have to be accountable for myself. They healed me. And so I always say that our children are reflecting back to us a part of ourselves that is looking to be healed at this moment in time. Like that's the beauty of our children. That's like how the system is designed.
Yes. And I think we can take those wins when we see them too, right? Like when our kids reflect back to us something that we can say, okay, we're learning from them. They're learning from us. We're getting to a better place. And then that sort of goes in your toolkit, right? And you know what? Celebrate that win, right? Every single little one.
100%.
Yeah. And all of this. So I would love for us to dive more into your modules, Liza, because talking about this reminds me of The Rock, which is one of your modules. So can you share with us like a little bit more about each one of your modules and how, you step into this mentorship role of validating, inspiring, empowering? Like we just love all of that and want to really allow you to speak.
Yes, for sure. Yes. Well, let's just talk about The Rock. Well, so first I always talk about accountability, right? And accountability is where I start, and I talk about the dance. And the dance is just like we all know, we have this crazy dance swirling in our homes, right? And we don't want to live in these cycles, but we don't know what to do about it. And I call that dynamic the dance. And every single member of your household is a participant to this dance. But when you become accountable to your role, you can start influencing a new dance. So that is all about accountability. And then The Rock, well, the way I validate people is I always bring up a story of the significance of this module. And The Rock is about my daughter was flaring. She also ended up having PANS, pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome, I believe it stands for. She was hallucinating greatly. And I didn't know what to do in these moments. I was panicked. And my therapist said, you just need to be a rock. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, you just need to do nothing. Like, what is a rock? A rock is just a heavy piece that sits there and it's grounding and it doesn't say anything. It's a presence of security and stability. That's what a rock does. Be that. And I was like, okie dokie. And I told him, like, you want me to sit in her craziness? I can't even sit in my own craziness. And he said, well, that's where you have to start. So that is the premise of The Rock, of like, look, I can't tell you how to sit in your own discomfort. You got to figure that out, right? So that's what I had to learn to do. And I threw myself into radical self-care. making sure I slept well, set myself up for a good night's sleep. I had to stop drinking alcohol like Monday through Thursday. I had to like do these little things to protect my sleep. I started implementing a morning routine. You know what? Maybe I can just stretch and just run through some gratitude in my head in the morning. Just radical self-care, cutting off the people, places, and things that don't serve you. Those are the things that helped me be a better rock. So when my daughter was having psychiatric issues, terrifying, I just had to be like, I am here for you. I'm here. Whatever you need, I am here, without like, oh my God, what are you doing? Do you need a medication? Should we get some CBD? Like that's not adding anything good. That's not being a rock. That's like, she doesn't need that. Now I'm just adding fuel to her fire. A rock is like, I am here for you. I love you. I'm going to sit here with you. You tell me what you need, anything you need, but I'm here, and you just be a presence. It helps for herxing. It helps when my kids are dysregulated. You're also bringing compassion. So that's really the rock. There's like nothing secret about it. It's just like, be a presence of solid. Give them something solid.
And I think that can be especially challenging as parents, because I think we often want to try to fix things, right?
Yes.
We want to try to get in there and find a solution, help them find a solution, get them feeling better faster, when maybe we are just sort of like, we're turning that nice little slow dance that we're working on into like, the Tasmanian devil,
right?
Moving around. And
well, Debbie, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Why do we want to fix them urgently? Because we are in discomfort. So It's like the whole thing about the urgency that I learned is we will shift into urgent fix it mode so that they feel better, so that we can feel better. But we need to feel better first to help them feel better. The whole thing is inverted.
And I think I need that tattooed on my forehead, because you're exactly right. It's about me being uncomfortable with their unhappiness or their misery, right? So you're absolutely right. I mean, that's enlightening for me. And I'm going to have to remind myself, right?
It's such a huge mindset shift. And so really what they need, so they're going to sense your fix it mode. And then we're basically telling them, something's wrong with you. You are broken. I'm repeatedly trying to fix you because watching you is making me panic because this is all wrong. So I really need you to get it together so I can feel better. And This is all happening in a split second. And it's probably programmed in us and we don't know how to be comfortable. But like now when I see my child in distress, which thankfully doesn't really happen very often anymore, I have to step back and be like, oh my gosh, okay. She is having a moment. Okay. All right. I'm going to take 5 deep breaths because I got to calm myself down before I contribute anything to her. That's the inverted shift out. So now I'm coming as a rock and a figure, and that actually helps her feel better.
And I think that almost gives someone like me who has this desperate need to fix things a little bit of permission to step back and be the rock, right? Because I can ultimately think by stepping back and not jumping in and trying to find all these solutions, I'm going to actually be doing a service to her, because I'm going to be healing myself through this and letting her emulate that in a way, or him. Either one. Yeah, I really love that, because it does feel almost like it is giving me permission. And I'll admit, I'm not good at that. I'm not good at sitting back and letting things sort of unfold, or even, as you were mentioning earlier, sometimes at my very worst, I can hand things over to God or, the universe, and just say, you know what? And this is sort of like the same thing, right? It's I'm gonna sit back. I'm going to let things fall into place, and I'm going to trust that we're going to figure out what to do here.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's even, I have found myself, you are emulating your modeling in times with my son, because he triggers me a lot. I've had to say things like, okay, I'll be back. I need to take a break. I need to do some deep breathing. I will be right back. And like, that's okay to say. Like, I'm telling him, I'm not regulated. This conflict with you is stressing me out. Right. So I'm going to take a break and go regulate myself. Like, that's very solid parenting, as opposed to, escalating the volume, and these types of things that I did for years.
You don't know until you know, right? Like, I mean, we all are conditioned from our own upbringings of what we thought was normal. And not that I don't think you have to come from like a really bad situation to have kind of dysfunctional coping mechanisms or habits or whatever, like no one's perfect. We are all trying to be better people, right? So you don't know until you know. And I think it's like that place of awareness that when you do have a learning moment, like then in the next instance that comes about, then you are like, oh yeah, this is where I can take that minute. And then you try something different and then you see a different result. And then it just starts to compound and it's like easier to do, So Debbie, we all have to give ourselves grace, and none of us are perfect humans, but when you do have that opportunity to try something different because something different, then it's cool to see like the win out of that, like the rewards that come out of that.
That's right. And I would also add that in those moments that I've been able to do that, and I do believe I'm getting better at it, maybe it's all this self-work we've been doing these last couple of years, but in those moments where I do the right thing and I'm able to step back and be like, I'm here for you. When she or he walks out of the room and they're like, okay, thanks, I could be like, I parented the shit out of that moment.
Yeah, you did.
I love it. It's so true. That is a win. And you're like, right. Boom.
So I would encourage anyone to just give it a try, because that feeling alone is worth it.
It's
so validating.
It's so cool. And like, I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing, Liza, for, like being kind of that aha moment for people. Like, it's hard work. Like it's hard work to step into this. And it can be so clouded with so much, the complexity of past trauma. And trauma doesn't, we've talked about this with mental health professionals. I think a lot of people shy away from accepting past trauma because it may not be this like massive like assault or, something in that capacity, but trauma can show up in very small ways, but make a big impact. It's hard as hell to look at that stuff. It's hard. You don't want to see it. You don't want to confront it. But once you do, like the freedom that you have in that. And I love that you're empowering people to take that step.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And one of the things that I know actually was interesting to you, Candace, is this whole power of neutrality situation. One of the practices that I utilized to become the rock is practicing the power of neutrality. When you're in these moments of really high intensity, you can tell yourself, this is not a good thing, but this is not necessarily a bad thing. This is just a thing. And so much that is happening in our lives, especially like these moments in the day that we are like red alert, DEFCON 4, could just be neutral. And there's so much growth from all of these experiences that we're having with our children. I mean, yeah, there are bad things that happen, but like we could potentially be labeling it so much more of a higher crisis, right? And it's not to be invalidating to our children, but that's how I sometimes am able to show up as a rock of compassion. Okay, you are having a moment right now. You are scared. Let's breathe. But in my head, I'm like, okay, practice neutrality. This is neutral. We are safe. This isn't the end of the world. And just kind of making sure that we understand and recognize we're in a moment. It's not a good thing. It's not really a bad thing. It's just a thing.
That's also giving permission to sort of just evaluate things where they really are, right? To just step back and just let things be. And that for me makes it that much easier to let go of the drama that's associated with some of the things that were so bad before. But then if I can step back and go, okay, how bad is this really? And I never really thought about it as practicing neutrality, but I think that's a great tool, right? How bad is this really? Let's look at this where it is, and let's just kind of almost put the drama that's associated with it, put the angst that's associated with it, like on the shelf for a second, and just say, okay, this is the situation. It could be bad, it could be good, it might not be good, it might not be bad. We're walking this line, but at least we can evaluate it here by taking some of that emotion out of it.
100%. And this I've used a lot when I see my kids flare, or you're in a program and they herks. Like those have, for me, have been really triggering moments. Okay. Or school issues, very triggering. And I just have to be like, okay, I'm going to shift to neutral. I'm not making decisions. Okay. So where does it hurt? Okay. Your hip. When did it start? Okay. All right. Well, let's see where we are tomorrow. Maybe take an Epsom salt bath. You're collecting data because it's neutral. All of this data that you're taking in is neutral data. And then you can assess, okay, maybe that pill that we're on is causing you problems. Because like here you are 5 days later or 4 days, you know what I'm saying? You got to collect data, more data. Mm-hmm. And all of these pieces of data are neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And
can I also say, Liza, sorry to interrupt you. Like, I feel like this is such a powerful piece that it doesn't sound as powerful as it really is, because you are validating your child in that moment.
Yes.
You're validating that they are feeling however they're feeling, be it good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Like you are sitting with them and you are validating them. And this has been a huge piece of my healing of not feeling validated in various aspects of my life, including on a medical front, where not being validated by practitioners or, on the alpha gal journey and all of that. And it was like this compounding, like boom, for me, like, so this is such a powerful piece that then will always be with your child, that they felt validated.
Right. Yes. It's like, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Okay. That hurts, but without me feeling panic about it, that this is just, she's giving me information.
Right.
I don't know what I'm going to do with the information. Maybe that was a one-off. Maybe she'll tell me more. But so that's why it's called the power of neutrality. There is power in that, in practice. And it's a practice. Like it is such a practice. No, nobody's mastered neutrality, but it is just empowering. It's really a very big empowerment tool, because you are making this executive decision to place this in a world of neutrality right now. In the present moment, I'm going to be neutral about this.
Yeah. And you know what else is really cool about this that I hadn't seen prior to this phone call is when you're talking about this power of neutrality, I see how it holds hands with the rock,
Yes.
right? You see how they're sort of interwoven and they complement each other, and they're similar in some ways, but they're really complementary to each other. It's really neat. It's really, really cool, Liza.
It's so great that you see that, because I always do accountability first, and then I teach the power of neutrality, and then I teach the rock. But people need to be turned on to neutrality first, because it's going to help you be the rock.
Yes, absolutely. I see that. Well, can you tell us where you go from there?
So then I go into this whole thing about reptilian brain, and it's basically this whole conversation about shame and judgment. Because so many decisions and emotions and triggers that we experience really come from shame. Mm-hmm. And it's about, back in the day, I did a podcast with Dr. Sean Horn, who was like the shame busting psychologist. And it like forever changed my mindset too, in that shame is a learned behavior. You start, I believe she said it as early as 15 months, you start feeling the emotion of shame. And basically it's a survival tactic, because, you know, back in the caveman days, if you were banished from your tribe, you would not survive. So you never want to be banished. You never want to be kicked out of the tribe. So they use shame to keep you in line. Don't bring shame to yourself. Don't bring, like, so we feel so unsafe when our child is embarrassing us. We feel so unsafe when our family starts to look different. Like, these are just examples. We feel unsafe when we show up 20 minutes late to baseball practice. Why? It's about feeling safe. And that's like your old reptilian brain from the prehistoric issue. You know, I'm not a history buff, but it goes way back. And so just understanding the origin of shame will help you break free of shame and the fear of judgment. And we need to do that because we pass it on to our kids. And the biggest one that my clients can always relate to is being late. Hurry up, get your shoes on, hurry up, take these pills. No, you got to take, no, it's 5 pills today. Take the 5 pills. And it's just ridiculousness. Mm-hmm. And you're really shaming your child over the possibility of being late to something that's probably not that important. And so it's in all of these little moments, and we need to understand we are safe. We are safe. And I do tell this story that my son was socially banished in middle school because, you know, hands can do that. It makes you very erratic and difficult to be around. You can lose a lot of friends. And he survived. And we survived. And he's happy today. And he didn't die. And you're not going to die if you're socially banished. It's like you are safe. And that's basically where I bring people to light of that.
Okay. I think that's great that you shared that too. That's personal, right? But it's so important for people to see that it's possible to get to the other side.
Yes. Yes. And I do that's where like the validation comes in, is I do share these stories that like other moms are totally going to understand. And then I go into the purge of like, that's all unpacking grief, you know, make sure we tend to it, ways to tend to it. Grief, there is so much gold in grief, but we pack it away in these boxes and tuck it in a closet in the attic that nobody will ever find. And it just takes up a lot of space. Mm-hmm. It takes up space in our bodies. It takes up space in our journey. So that's kind of like the purge. And then the last thing I talk about with moms is like this whole passion piece. And I did a podcast recently with a gentleman who talked about being stuck at like 70% recovery. And a lot of people get stuck in that 70% where like you're feeling great. And then you start socializing more and doing more at work. And then you like are in the bed for 3 weeks. And that's where you're like kind of in this chronic place. And what really will tip you over is finding that joy, that passion, what lights you up, where do you channel your creative juices? And I basically call it get a life. Like our life can't just be the Lyme of our children. Our life cannot just be the doctor's appointments. You have to balance your life with the things that light you up. And it's such an important piece, but I can't talk about that at the beginning. It might be a little triggering. So I save that kind of towards the end.
No, I bet. And I just want to add, you're talking about sharing these stories, and it just speaks to how authentic you are, which I think is beautiful. And that's how people learn, right? Candace and I have this funny thing that we always say, it's not a podcast unless we say diarrhea, right? Because nobody wants to say diarrhea. But like our first podcast, I was like, how many times did I say diarrhea? Right. But if you can't come out and you can't open this up and you can't share, people are missing out. So thank you for being willing to share these tough stories.
You are so welcome. It's such an honor to speak with both of you and to share this with your audience.
Yes, absolutely. And we have one last question for you. So, is there a song, artist, or album in this moment or for all time that brings you joy?
Yes. The artist that brings me joy is the band Queen. Because we are the champions, Mama. We are the champions. We're championing all the time. So that like I always play that jam when I'm feeling low. Like remind yourself that like you are the champion. Like we are just raising this beautiful generation, and we cheer for ourselves. And there's so many. Pressure. Like that song. I'm like, yeah, I'm under pressure, and I just need somebody to love. Like. Love yourself. Like the whole greatest hits album, like is always on my Spotify.
I love that. I love that so much. It makes me want to actually put it on like right now at full volume, because it's so true. And we are so grateful that you're willing to come on here and talk about how you're finding joy, how you're helping others find joy, how you're helping us find joy. And so we can't thank you enough, Liza. Thank you so much for taking the time today. And we really look forward to the next time that we can chat.
Oh, I can't wait to chat with you gals again. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Liza. Thank you for joining us today on In the Tall Grass. Visit us at 2alphagals.com. That's TWO alphagals.com. Or you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at 2alphagals. If you enjoyed listening, please leave a review and help us grow this community.
We're all faced with obstacles on our journey, whether it be food allergies or tick-borne diseases. You might outgrow the reactions, but you won't outgrow the person you become. Ticks suck, but life doesn't have to.